You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. Out where the asphalt bled into sky, the heat shimmer thickened, coalescing into something vaguely human. A jolt, like a skipped cog in my chest. Just a lone figure thumbing the void on the roadside ahead. As our car devoured the distance, a face swam into focus, weary, etched with a desperation that snagged the breath. Beside me, Clara let out a sharp gasp. "Did you see?" she whispered. I could only nod, my grip tightening on the wheel until the knuckles shone white, because I had seen. And some cold premonition told me we would see him again. That same solitary traveler, impossibly waiting for us miles further down this desolate ribbon of road. I am Elias Thorne. What began as a pilgrimage of celebration, 5 years bound to Clara, marked by a journey from the cool embrace of the coast toward the Grand Canyon's chasm, curdled somewhere deep in Nevada's arid heart. The early days blurred into sun-drenched melodies and shared laughter, the landscape scrolling past our windows like painted backdrops. Then came the desert, vast and indifferent. The air grew thick, pressing down. Silence became a presence, broken only by the radio's insistent hiss, a sound impervious to my fumbling adjustments. We encountered the traveler perhaps an hour into that suffocating Nevada expanse. He materialized not gradually, but at once, plucked from the shimmering air itself. A solitary silhouette etched against the glare, arm crooked skyward, face obscured by impenetrable lenses. 70 miles per hour offered only a fractured impression. Sun-scorched flesh, garments frayed by wind and time, a back slumped like a weary burden. "Elias?" Clara murmured, twisting, her gaze snagged on the receding figure. "Should we have—" I shook my head, the motion sharp. "Bedrock rule, Clara. Not out here. Not ever." She subsided, but the unease lingered in the set of her shoulders. He looked so lost. "It's brutal out here." I offered hollow assurances about other drivers, pushing the car onward. Yet a tremor of disquiet took root, a cold seed in the desert heat. Perhaps 20 minutes bled away, measured in hypnotic dashes of white line. Then again, the same posture, the identical worn attire, that unwavering desperate solicitation. Impossible. Utterly. We hadn't stopped, hadn't slowed. There existed no conceivable way he could have preceded us. "Elias," Clara's voice was thin, stretched taut. "Isn't that—" "It can't be," I clipped out, the denial tasting like ash on my tongue, because my eyes, my gut, screamed yes. Somehow, against all logic, it was the same man. We hurtled past once more. This time closer, the impression sharpened, features drawn, skeletal almost, beneath the concealing glass. And those eyes, or the voids where eyes should be, sunk deep, swallowing the light. We drove on, enveloped in a silence thick with unspoken dread. Heat stroke? Shared hallucination? We grasped at straws, yet the truth felt colder, sharper, lurking just beyond the veil of reason. Another quarter hour dissolved. Then Clary cried out, a sharp, fractured sound. He wasn't beside the road. He occupied. It planted dead center in our path. Reflex slammed my foot down. Tires screamed protest on the blistering tarmac, halting a scant feet from the obscenely still form. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Clara's fingers dug into the dash, leaving pale crescents. He stood, unmoving, those black lenses fixed upon us. Slowly, with chilling deliberation, an arm lifted, a finger extending, singling us out. "God, Elias," Clara whimpered. "What is it? What do we do?" Every sane instinct shrieked reverse. Flee. But a darker, insistent curiosity held me paralyzed. The need to know, with trembling fingers, I lowered the window. The inferno outside rushed in, carrying a stench, rank, cloying, the perfume of sun-baked decay. "What do you want?" My voice, a frail thread in the immense silence. His mouth open, stretched. What issued forth wasn't speech, but a corrosive burst of static, interwoven with clicks like insectile chattering, a sound that scraped along the nerves. And then, nothing. He wasn't there. Not faded, not run. Simply erased from existence. We stared at each other, faces bleached, tremors running beneath our skin. Did that? Did we just... Clara began, her voice a ghost. I could only nod, my mind a frantic scramble for purchase on reality's crumbling ledge. With hands that shook, I slipped the car into gear and eased forward. We drove, numbly, the car a fragile capsule against the encroaching twilight. Every flicker of heat haze, every roadside shadow became a potential menace. Then a beacon, improbable in the vastness, the weak neon glow of a diner. Unspoken accord guided my hands. We needed sanctuary, coffee, the illusion of normalcy. Inside, the air hung stale with grease and solitude. A couple of truckers hunched over the counter, an old man solitary in a booth by the window. Martha, her name tag read, approached with weary professionalism. "Coffee?" she inquired. We ordered coffee, pie, solace in the mundane. As Martha turned away, I heard myself ask, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Ever hear strange things about this highway?" Martha froze, her pen hovering. A flicker crossed her features. Weariness, yes, but something akin to recognition. She cast a furtive glance around the near-empty space, then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You saw him, the traveler." Clara inhaled sharply beside me. "You know about him?" I asked, a chill tracing my spine. Martha gave a slow, grim nod. "Been part of this road longer than memory. Some say he's a spirit, trapped, always seeking passage. Others, they reckon he's not from around here, not from anywhere." She straightened abruptly, her professional mask snapping back into place. "Just stories, though. He does funny things to folks out here." She retreated towards the coffee machine, leaving us suspended in the echo of her words. We processed this in a thick, unnerving quiet. "Elias," Clara finally whispered, her voice brittle. "Take me home. Forget the canyon. Just away from here." I reached across the formica, gripping her hand. "Dawn," I promised. "We find a room, sleep if we can, and turn back at first light." But the promise felt hollow, fragile against the enormity of what we'd encountered. As we settled the check, I felt eyes on us. The old man in the corner booth, his gaze steady, ancient. As we moved towards the door, his voice, dry as desert dust, snagged us. "No outrunning him, you know." Clara went rigid beside me. "What are you saying?" I asked, though a part of me recoiled from the answer. His roomy eyes latched onto mine. "He don't want a lift, son. He wants relief. Someone else to walk his patch. Someone to take his place on this God-forsaken asphalt so he can finally rest." A cold dread permeated my bones. How could you possibly know that? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, etched deep into the sun-leathered face. 40 years, he murmured. 40 years I've been looking over my shoulder. Since the night I sped past, congratulating myself on my caution. He turned his gaze back to the window, to the deepening violet outside. "Can't escape," he repeated, softer now. "Drive fast, drive far, makes no difference. He's always there, waiting, until you surrender or pass the burden on." Clara pulled at my sleeve, her eyes wide with primal fear. "Elias, now." I steered her out into the cooling night air. The old man's pronouncement, "Pass the burden on," clinging like grave dust, we fled into the darkness, the engine a frantic pulse against the immense quiet. Speed limits became suggestions, then forgotten entirely. Every roadside marker, every glint of moonlight on rock, held a potential threat. The sensation of pursuit was palpable, a cold pressure on the back of my neck. Each glance into the rearview mirror was an act of will, half expecting to find gaunt features reflected there, a rictus grin promising succession, ready to offer his place. The desert unspooled before us, infinite and unblinking under the stars. Our journey, I knew with chilling certainty, was perilously unfinished. He was out there, the traveler, pacing the void between destinations. And sooner or later, the road would bring us face to face with him again. Who expects reality to fracture over a scrap of canvas bought cheap in some forgotten bazaar? Not I. Yet the day that nameless portrait crossed my threshold marked the precise moment the world began to tilt, its familiar angles skewing into something alien. I offer this account plainly, without artifice or appeals for pity. Consider it an anchor, cast before the tide pulls me entirely adrift from myself. I spied it tucked away in the shadowed labyrinth of a stall piled high with detritus. The proprietor, adrift in a sea of wrinkled cotton, offered barely a glance. Propped against a crippled chair leg, the painting presented a formal study. 19th century, perhaps. A man rigid in dark tailoring, poised before a turbulent sky of bruised grays. But the face was a cipher, an unsettling lacuna where features ought to reside. A peculiar magnetism drew me. The compulsion was inexplicable, yet absolute. When I inquired about the price, the old man merely shrugged, his eyes finally flicking towards me, and named a sum so trivial it felt almost illicit not to pay. Money changed hands. The canvas, surprisingly heavy, was mine. Back in my apartment, lacking an empty nail or a ready hook, I leaned it against the living room wall, low to the floor. For long moments, I scrutinized the blank oval, searching for the ghost of an eye socket, the phantom curve of a lip. Nothing. Just smooth, aged emptiness, as if the original visage had simply evaporated. The figure itself was stark, a high-collared coat, one hand resting possessively on an ornately carved table. Behind him, the rolling nebulous clouds offered no catharsis of lightning, only an oppressive, leaden weight. Dismissing it, I retreated to the kitchen, seeking the mundane solace of preparing a meal. Restlessness gnawed at me that evening. Lounging on the sofa, I surfed channels, yet my gaze kept snagging on the painting across the room. The void where the face should be pulsed with an unnerving attention. It felt like scrutiny, eyeless but intense. Unease prickling my skin, I rose and turned the canvas to face the wall, silencing its mute regard. Just fatigue, I reasoned, the residue of a long day. Later, cocooned in bed, the familiar nocturnal symphony of my apartment. The refrigerator's drone, the distant sigh of traffic, offered little comfort. Darkness pressed in as I courted sleep. Around 2, a sound sliced through the quiet. My own name, breathed in my own voice. A whisper, insidious as soft, emanating from the living room, my chest constricted, my mouth turned to dust. A frantic drumming commenced against my ribs, loud enough, I feared, to echo in the small space. Dismiss it, I urged myself. A hypnagogic trick. Then, unmistakably, "Hey," it breathed, the timbre precisely mine. Cold floor met bare feet as I swung out of bed. Flicking on the hall light felt like a transgression against the thick silence. I moved towards the living room, breath held captive in my lungs. Peering around the door frame, I scanned the space. Empty. The painting remained reversed, its back to the room, yet the air hung thick, chilled, raising goose flesh along my arms, tightening the skin on my neck. Drawn forward, I heard it, a faint friction, like old fabric shifting. Logic warred with the primal urge to spin the canvas back, to confront the source. How absurd, I chided myself, to be unnerved by pigment and wood. Yet my hand trembled as it grasped the frame. Turning it, I faced the figure once more. The suit, the table, the storm-racked sky, all unchanged. Except, was that the nascent curve of a jawline? The blankness wasn't perfectly smooth now. Vague contours emerged, the barest suggestion of cheekbones, the subtle arc of a chin sketched as if by unseen charcoal. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. Tentatively, I reached out, my fingertip hovering over the surface. Was the paint bubbling? Was there something beneath? The texture felt subtly uneven, minutely raised. I snatched my hand back, my breathing shallow. The whisper ceased, but the room felt saturated with a waiting presence. Retreating, I secured myself in the bedroom, locking the door, seeking refuge in a sleep that, when it finally came, was thin and troubled. Morning arrived with a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. My first act was to check the painting. Part of me expected, perhaps hoped, to find the previous night's perception a figment of exhausted nerves. But no. Closer inspection revealed further definition coalescing in the facial void. Not complete, not yet, but the architecture was emerging, the subtle dip beneath cheekbones, a faint darkening where eye sockets would lie. A frigid wave washed through me. Canvases don't spontaneously generate features. This defied reason. Scrabbling for my phone, I captured an image, comparing it to one hastily snapped the day before. The difference was stark, undeniable. Definition had bloomed where only blankness had existed. Breakfast was a choked-down formality. The apartment felt suddenly hostile, confining. I fled to the anonymous sanctuary of work. All day, a low-level hum of anxiety vibrated beneath my skin. A colleague inquired if I was unwell. My silence was unusual. I mumbled a denial, eyes perpetually seeking the clock, dreading the inevitable return. Yet, return I did. Stepping inside, the living room air felt stale, tinged with an odd scent. Old wood perhaps, and something akin to damp wool. Hesitantly, heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird, I approached the painting. Silence reigned, but under the lamplight I froze. The face now possessed the distinct suggestion of eyes. Not fully rendered, but the hollows were undeniably present, shadowed and expectant. A faint, ghostly line hinted at eyebrows. My skin turned clammy. I found myself rubbing my arms, trying to dispel the insistent prickling. Calm down, I commanded myself, stepping back. An idea formed. Containment. Seclusion. I carried the painting, heavier now it seemed, to the small storage closet off the hall. Placing it inside felt like an act of ritual banishment. I shut the door firmly, then dragged a small chest of drawers before it, barricading the uncanny within. Perhaps, I prayed, this would grant peace. The evening passed in a strained imitation of normalcy, television flickering unheeded. But the silence wasn't empty. My own voice echoed faintly in the recesses of my mind. A siren call towards the closet door. Around midnight, the tension became unbearable. Rising, I crept to the closet, pressing my ear against the cool wood. And there it was. My name whispered plainly, intimately, in my own cadence. My hands shook. Nausea churned deep within me. Shoving the chest aside, I opened the door, pulling the painting back into the light. The face had sharpened further. The nascent shapes of eyes and nose bore a disturbing familiarity, echoing my own reflection, yet subtly skewed. The hairline mirrored mine. The jaw's angle was unnervingly close. With a strangled gasp, I dropped it. It struck the floor with a soft, dull thud. I stood over it, breath tearing through me. Expulsion seemed the only answer. Yet the memory of the seller, the ease of the transaction, stayed my hand. This felt like more than mere pigment. It felt tethered, imbued with something persistent. Discarding it might not sever the connection. Still, its presence in my living space was intolerable. I leaned it against the hallway wall, face hidden once more, a compromise born of fear. That night, every light in the apartment blazed. Sleep was a fragmented landscape of waking terrors, punctuated by imagined footsteps, my shirt clinging damply to my skin, my mouth perpetually dry and sour. Over the ensuing days, the transformation accelerated. Each reluctant glance revealed features solidifying, resolving into an increasingly precise mimicry of my own. By the fourth day, the ambiguity vanished. The facial structure was unequivocally mine. The eyes held a muted version of my own hazel hue. The lips shared my distinct curve. Even the way the painted hair fell seemed borrowed from my own unruly locks. Catching my reflection became a disquieting experience. My own eyes seemed dulled, fatigued, as if witnessing a stranger stare back. The whispers persisted, insidious auditory phantoms. Sometimes, in broad daylight, my name would brush against my ear, intimate as breath, though I stood utterly alone. I'd whirl around, heart hammering, finding only empty air. Once, mid-afternoon, the sound materialized directly behind me as I stood in the kitchen. A stack of plates slipped from my grasp, shattering on the tile, the crash echoing my own frayed nerves. Kneeling amidst the shards, my trembling reflection stared back from a dozen fractured surfaces. I scanned my own face compulsively, searching for signs of erosion, wondering if my very essence was being siphoned onto the canvas. Night offered no respite. Lying rigid in bed, every creak of the building, every distant siren became a potential harbinger. Often, I'd rise and stand sentinel in my bedroom doorway, gazing at the dark rectangle propped against the hall wall. It felt like a lodestone, exerting a subtle, draining pull. Numbness would creep into my limbs, a leaden weight settling in my chest. The thought circled relentlessly. Was I losing my mind? But daylight brought the undeniable proof. The painting, my face staring back. This was no mere stress-induced hallucination. One evening, resolve hardened within me. I illuminated every corner of the apartment, then stood the painting on a chair, forcing a confrontation. I studied it, tracing the lines with my eyes, then, hesitantly, with my fingers. The painted surface felt warm, impossibly, undeniably warm, like human skin. Revulsion and terror surged through me. My breath grew shallow, ragged, minute details leaped out. The faint, silvery trace of a scar high on my forehead, the precise curve of my earlobe. Pressing a hand flat against my sternum, I tried to quell the frantic rhythm beneath. "What do you want?" The question emerged as a thin tremor in the supercharged air. Silence answered, but I felt a tingling cascade down my arms, a strange pressure building behind my eyes. Then the whisper, closer than ever. "Come closer." Panic seized me. I shoved the painting violently. It tumbled, landing face up on the carpet, the frame digging into the pile. I stood above it, panting, trapped in a vortex of indecision. From the kitchen drawer, I retrieved a roll of duct tape. A frantic urge to seal it away, to smother it, possessed me. I began wrapping the frame, binding it, wanting desperately to cover the face entirely, but recoiling from touching that uncanny warmth again. My hands shook violently, making the simple act of tearing the tape an ordeal. I managed to obscure most of it, though glimpses of the face remained visible through gaps. Shoving the bound canvas into a large black refuse sack felt both profane and necessary. I dragged it into my bedroom. A foolish choice, perhaps, illogical, but thought of leaving it unattended felt worse. If it could whisper across rooms, surely a bedroom door was no barrier. Yet, having it near, contained, felt marginally safer. That night, the whispers escalated into a soft, pervasive chant of my name. My own voice multiplied, echoing not from one source but from the very air around me. I clamped my hands over my ears, shouting "Stop!" into the oppressive soundscape, but the chanting persisted, relentless. My body locked in tension, neck rigid, eyes burning from exhaustion. Eventually, oblivion claimed me. I awoke in the thin grey light of pre-dawn, the chanting silenced. Turning, my gaze fell upon the black sack slumped in the corner. Was that movement? A subtle shifting within the plastic confines? Bile rose in my throat. I didn't investigate. Tears tracked unexpectedly down my face, hot against my cold skin. My chest felt banded with steel. Something definitive had to be done. Forcing myself through the motions of dressing, I hefted the bagged painting. Waiting until the hallway was clear, avoiding neighborly eyes, I carried my burden to the car. Even in the sterile confines of the elevator, a faint whisper slithered from the sack, raising the hairs on my arms. I drove, directionless, for what felt like hours, but was likely mere minutes, searching for a suitable place to abandon it. A dumpster? A remote patch of woods? But my mind conjured images of its inevitable return, tracking me down like a homing beacon. Defeated, I circled back, the painting still beside me on the passenger seat. Re-entering my apartment felt like crossing the threshold into a cage. Frustration and a profound, bone-deep fear left my legs unsteady, my mouth tasting of ash. I deposited the painting, still bagged, in the center of the living room floor. Standing over it, breathing hard, I heard it again. My voice calm, almost gentle. "You're almost ready," it murmured. Dizziness washed over me. I sank to my knees, staring at the black plastic shroud, fists clenching and unclenching against the carpet, trying to anchor myself in the tactile present. Minutes passed. Finally, steeling myself, I rose and tore open the bag. The duct tape was ripped, shredded from within, as if the canvas itself had strained against its bonds. The painting's face, revealed now, fully formed, was mine. Not an approximation, not a resemblance. It was my face, exact in every detail, staring back with an expression both alien and intimately familiar. Nausea coiled violently in my gut. My temples throbbed. With trembling hands, I dragged the painting upright, leaning it against the wall where it had first stood. My palms were slick with sweat. The pulse in my ears was a deafening roar. Thought itself felt sluggish, mired in terror. My reflection, caught in the glass of a framed photograph nearby, seemed wan, ethereal. The color leached from my eyes. I wiped perspiration from my brow, struggling for breath. Am I still me? The question echoed in the sudden silence. I looked into the painting's eyes. My eyes. And they seemed sharp, intensely alive. Then I touched my own cheek. My skin felt cool, strangely distant. And so here I remain. The painting leans against the wall, its gaze locked with mine. Its eyes are my eyes. The archaic suit, the turbulent sky, they frame a face that is no longer merely emerging, but fully present, fully mine. Yet the light around the figure seems different now, subtly luminous, as if poised on the verge of animation. I feel attenuated, drained, a profound weariness settling in my bones. Goose flesh still prickles my skin intermittently. The whispers have subsided, replaced by a low internal hum, like static on an untuned frequency. Every few moments, an invisible current pulls my attention back to the canvas. The same instinctive draw one feels towards a mirror, but approaching it feels perilous. The fear is no longer a creeping dread. It is a raw, visceral certainty. My thoughts scatter like startled birds. I cling to the fading notion of myself, yet a chilling possibility takes root. Perhaps the exchange is already complete. Perhaps the I writing this is merely the fading impression, while the true presence resides there, trapped in oil and canvas, or worse, preparing to step free. I cannot look away. That, at least, is the unvarnished truth. Never before had a photographic journey induced such a visceral uncoiling of dread within me. Never had I imagined that a tranquil stretch of countryside could make my hands tremble merely because night descended, and the notion that a forgotten well could fracture my perception of reality? Utterly unthinkable. Yet precisely this transpired 2 days past, when I paused at that forsaken property dominated by a well cloaked in ancient moss. I intend to recount what registered on my eyes, my ears, the very marrow of my bones. No embellishments, no narrative flourish. This is the unvarnished sequence, moment by moment, from my arrival until this instant. I was navigating a serpentine back road deep in the pursuit of atypical scenery for a personal portfolio. My camera rested on the passenger seat, spare batteries nestled in a satchel at my feet, a thermos of cooling coffee beside me. The asphalt ribbon stretched through utter emptiness. No dwellings, no barns, not a flicker of human presence for miles untold. Then a diminutive wooden marker, its paint cracked, proclaiming Widow's Drop. I eased the car onto the shoulder. A dirt track vanished into a dense stand of towering trees. With the sun beginning its slow plunge behind me, I surmised the locale might possess a certain arresting quality in the waning light. I parked adjacent to a dilapidated fence, its timbers appearing centuries old, likely riddled with termites. It encircled a vast, unkempt field. Across the expanse, I discerned a small house, a listing stable, and an immense, wildly overgrown garden where weeds tangled waist-high around skeletal remnants of structures. A colossal oak, canted precariously, loomed near the stable. Silence reigned, save for the incessant thrum of insects. No breeze stirred, no birdsong graced the air. I swung a leg over the sagging fence, slung my camera strap securely around my neck, and ventured forth. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of sodden earth and decaying wood. With each step, my boots made sucking sounds in the mire. Before the stable stood the old well, circular, fashioned from massive weathered stones. Its rim was furred with viridian moss. A fractured pulley mechanism dangled above it. The rope snapped, its frayed end coiled limply on the ground. A gut instinct insisted this well held photographic potential. Sunlight struck it obliquely, amplifying its eerie aura. Lifting my camera, I fine-tuned the focus, capturing several frames from varying perspectives. Then, drawn closer, I sought an intimate shot of the moss itself. The stones felt slick beneath my exploring fingers, the moss yielding like damp velvet. Impulsively, I leaned over the well's precipice, gauging its depth. Sheer blackness swallowed the light. A chill current of air rose to meet me, carrying the fetid odor of stagnant water. I paused, utterly still. That's when the sound reached me. A whisper, faint as exhaled breath through clenched teeth. Initially, I dismissed it as wind whistling through crevices in the stonework, yet no breeze touched my face. And then, I swear it, my own name, uttered just once, woven into that susurrus. My stomach executed a sickening lurch. I recoiled, nearly fumbling my camera. Listening intently, I found only silence had returned. A scan of the surroundings revealed nothing, no one. Confusion washed over me. My phone confirmed my isolation. 0 signal bars. It had to be the wind, I reasoned. An acoustic quirk of the well, but doubt gnawed, demanding proof. Thus, the decision to record. Switching the camera to video mode, I leaned over the abyss once more, extending my arm, pointing the lens downward into the Stygian dark. My objective: capture any sound emanating from below. I held the camera steady, consciously quieting my breath. A tremor ran through my arm. My shoulders tensed. The nape of my neck prickled with cold. After perhaps a minute, deeming the recording sufficient, I began to retract the camera. But just before the lens cleared the darkness, a reflection flashed across its surface. Swift, ephemeral. It resembled a face, starkly not my own. I glimpsed the configuration of eyes, alien to my features, a mouth agape as if in a silent scream. I snatched the camera back violently, nearly dropping it again. My hands shook uncontrollably. Shutting off the recording, I fought to regulate my breathing, my heart hammering against my ribs. I glanced at the screen, half expecting a digital glitch, an odd lens flare. As my thumb hovered over the playback icon, the display flickered erratically and then plunged into blackness. Turning the camera over to inspect the lens, I froze. The glass was marred by scratches, but incomprehensibly, they were internal. The exterior surface remained smooth. Jagged edges scarred the inner elements, deep gouges, as if something sharp had clawed at the lens from within. Disbelief warred with rising nausea. I scrutinized it closely. No external cracks. The damage was undeniably inside, like microscopic blades had scraped the very heart of the optics. My mind struggled to process the impossibility. Revolted, I spun around, sweeping my gaze across the empty field. Nothing. Then, from the well, a wet, shifting noise like something displacing water. A jolt went through me. Clutching my camera, I turned from the well, my muscles coiled tight as springs, and retreated toward the car, casting glances over my shoulder. The well remained silent and ominous. The stable stood vacant. The distant house stared back with boarded-up eyes. My immediate impulse was flight, but as I reached the car, the sun had nearly surrendered the sky. My exploration had consumed more time than I'd realized. Near the stable, I noticed a small, hand-painted sign I'd missed earlier, advertising lodging. Wayfarer's Rest. Perhaps I'd overlooked a corresponding sign on the road. Getting into the car, I drove perhaps another mile down the lane and found the farmhouse indicated. A tall man, his boots caked in mud, met me at the door. He confirmed he had a room available. I paid him in cash. He handed me a key. The well remained my secret. Relating the experience felt futile, destined for disbelief. I carried my bag and camera inside. The room carried a musty scent, but exhaustion overrode any fastidiousness. Locking the door, I shed my mud-caked boots and sank onto the bed. My jeans felt damp against my skin. My back protested with a dull ache. I attempted once more to resurrect my camera. It remained stubbornly inert. The battery indicator had shown ample charge. That wasn't the issue. Plugging it into the charger yielded nothing. Not even the faintest flicker from the power light. A surge of anger mixed with unease rose in my chest. The camera was a significant investment. What could have caused those scratches? Carefully, I unscrewed the lens. The rear element bore similar wounds. The marks formed a chaotic spiraling pattern. Ragged lines crisscrossing with no discernible logic. I gently touched them with a lens cloth. They were definitively internal, beyond reach. Setting the ruined equipment aside, I forced myself to breathe deeply. A glance at the wall clock showed it nearing 9. Faintly, I heard the proprietor moving about outside, likely tending to animals or securing the property for the night. Rubbing my tired eyes, I opened the window, seeking fresh air. The darkness outside was absolute, punctuated only by a solitary distant light. Perhaps the stable or a neighbor's porch. The air held the promise of rain. I showered in the small attached bathroom. The water pressure fickle, the heat intermittent. As I rinsed my hair, my hands still trembled slightly. The image of that face, those distorted eyes, the gaping mouth kept replaying behind my eyelids. Remembering the whisper tightened my throat. Clean clothes on, I sat at a small desk, attempting again to clean the lens, a pointless exercise. Then, a soft noise intruded from outside, almost like dripping, but heavier, more viscous, followed by a faint scraping, like damp rubber dragged across wood. My jaw tightened. Approaching the window, I peered out, nothing visible at first. Then the sound repeated, closer now, to my right, near the corner of the house. A slimy, slithering cadence. Something was ascending the wall. Keeping the room lights off for better visibility, I let my eyes adjust. Against the dark siding near the roofline, I perceived a faint shape. A long, dark smear, several feet across, clinging to the structure. My breathing grew shallow. Pressing my forehead to the cool glass, I strained to see more clearly. The shape seemed to ripple at its edges. A glistening trail marked its path. Its surface caught the faint moonlight, shiny, like the track of some enormous gastropod. Formless, featureless, just a mass of liquescent darkness hauling itself upward. I backed away from the window, my mouth suddenly dry, heart pounding violently. I checked the door lock again, a futile gesture against such an intrusion. My phone remained useless, no signal. Activating its flashlight app only threw glare back from the window pane. The thought of opening the window was terrifying. I stood frozen, listening. Silence stretched. Then a scraping sound from directly overhead on the roof. A soft thump followed, as if something substantial shifted its weight on the shingles. I swallowed hard. The urge to cry out for the owner surged, but I suppressed it, needing certainty before inviting attention. My legs felt unsteady. Renewed sweat prickled my skin despite the room's chill. I decided to inspect the hallway. Easing the door open, I stepped into the dim corridor, illuminated only by a low wattage bulb at the far end. Floorboards groaned beneath my weight. I moved cautiously, ears straining for any sound from the roof. Stillness. Reaching the main living area, I found the front door secured, the windows latched. Peeking through a window overlooking the driveway revealed only a parked truck and skeletal trees. No movement, no anomalous shapes. Standing there, chest constricted with anxiety, I heard the owner's voice from another room, humming, perhaps in the kitchen. Drawn toward the sound, I found him. He nodded, inquiring if all was well. Not wanting to sound unhinged, I merely asked about large local animals known to climb onto roofs. He regarded me with mild confusion, shaking his head. Perhaps a stray cat, he offered, or a raccoon, but nothing of significant size. I nodded my thanks and retreated to my room. Upon returning, I scanned the walls, the ceiling. No damp patches, no dripping slime. The window remained closed, curtains drawn. Flipping on the overhead light, its stark brightness offered a sliver of comfort. I lingered by the window, listening. Absolute quiet. No scraping, no whispers. Exhaling slowly, I tried to quell the rising panic. Perhaps exhaustion and fear had conjured the shape. But the well, the face, the impossible scratches inside my camera, those were real. One final check outside before attempting sleep seemed necessary. Grasping my phone for its flashlight, I took a steadying breath and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was unchanged. I navigated to the back door, unlatched it, and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool, smelling of damp grass. I swept the flashlight beam across the farmhouse walls. Nothing amiss. Aiming it upward toward the roof yielded no revelations. I circled around to the side of the building where I'd heard the sounds. My light beam found the siding. Thin streaks of something dark and wet marred the surface, trailing vertically up the wall toward the roofline. My stomach clenched. The streaks looked undeniably fresh. Glistening droplets still clung to them, slowly sliding downward. Hesitantly, I reached out, touching one with my fingertip. It felt thick, unnervingly cold, and emitted a faint, stale odor. Revulsion crawled over my skin. Wiping my finger on my jeans, I stepped back, a knot of ice forming in my gut. The urge to shout for the owner returned, stronger this time. But again, I held back. Stepping forward, I tried to follow the streak's trajectory onto the roof, but the angle was impossible with the flashlight. My imagination flared, populating the unseen rooftop with horrors. A flicker of movement at the periphery of my vision made me whip the light around. Nothing. My chest tightened further. My pulse throbbed in my ears. A mosquito whined near my face, and the sudden movement nearly caused me to drop the light. Enough! I retreated inside, securing the lock, and hurried back to my room. Once there, I wedged a chair firmly beneath the doorknob. Then I sat on the bed, back pressed against the headboard, clutching my camera bag like a shield. Relaxation was impossible. My mind replayed the well encounter relentlessly. The reflection, the whisper, the lens violated from within. And now tangible evidence of something wet and cold scaling the farmhouse walls. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by phantom scraping and dripping sounds. Sometime around 4 a.m, exhaustion finally claimed me. Sunlight filtering through the curtains woke me. I rose stiffly, every muscle taut from residual tension. A cautious peek outside confirmed the streaks remained, now dried into dark, ugly lines against the siding. I packed with frantic speed, possessed by the singular desire to be gone. After settling my bill with the owner, no mention of the streaks, no display of the ruined camera, I got into my car. Just leave. As I pulled away, a final glance at the farmhouse fixed the image in my mind. Those dark lines, stark evidence of something that had climbed onto the roof and simply vanished. I am now back on the highway, putting as much distance as possible between myself and that place. At a rest stop, I tried the camera one last time. Utterly dead. The scratches remain, like miniature claw marks etched into the glass from the inside. And the face from the well haunts my thoughts. I felt its gaze, even in reflection. It was not my face. I have related these events precisely as they occurred. No artifice, no deeper interpretation. I possess no logical explanation, no further details to offer. I know only what I witnessed, what I heard, what I felt. My plan is to return to the city, have the camera examined, perhaps replace the lens. But the simple act of leaning over a well, especially in some remote corner of the world, now feels fraught with peril. And whenever I close my eyes, I see it. A slow, wet, indistinct shape crawling up the side of a building, leaving cold, dark trails in its wake. I despise the memory's persistence. I despise my inability to prove it. But I saw it. I heard it. And the inside of my camera lens bears the scars. The memory ignites with the sound. Phantom footfalls, faint yet undeniable, tracing a path beyond my chamber door. Midnight had long since tolled its hollow chime, and I, Elias, had surrendered to the embrace of a worn velvet armchair by the window, seeking solace for limbs twitching with nervous energy. This eyrie, the hotel's uppermost floor, promised tranquility, a haven for the reclusive. Yet the ancient timbers beneath the corridor carpet seemed to telegraph each deliberate step. Pressing my ear against the dense grain of the wood, I listened. A measured cadence, heel striking toe, a brief hesitation, then the pivot and return. No murmur of conversation, merely the solitary rhythm echoing in the hush. Through the fisheye lens of the peephole, the hallway swam in jaundiced light. Patterned runner unfurling towards a vanishing point of identical closed doors. Vacant. Still, the perambulation persisted, a tireless retracing of some invisible circuit. A knot tightened low in my chest. My throat felt scoured by sand. I'd sought refuge in this grand, decaying edifice precisely for its rumored peculiarities, craving isolation over solace, a stark chamber to confront the wreckage of recent choices. Instead, disembodied steps pacing the profound silence. When dawn eventually bled through the opulent, dust-laden curtains, it found me raw-nerved, unslept, oscillating between irritation and a nascent dread. An edifice this old, I reasoned, surely groaned with the settling of its bones, the size of pipes contracting in the cool air. Yes, that was the shape of it. Downstairs, the clerk, Mr. Finch, had offered a smile steeped in knowing sympathy upon my arrival. A subtle cant of his head that whispered, "Up there? Godspeed." I dismissed it then, a skeptic armored against tales of specters and lingering maledictions. My demons were mundane. Failure, regret, the life I'd fled. Later that afternoon, propelled by a restless need for answers, I prowled the corridors. The top floor exhaled antiquity. Rococo mirrors clouded with age hung beside portraits of long-forgotten patrons, their painted eyes following my passage. I paused before a vast rectangular looking glass adjacent to the main stairwell. Its silvered surface rippled, subtly distorting my reflection into something gaunt and stretched. As the sconces flickered, a fleeting smudge materialized beside my elongated form. A brief stain of darkness in the periphery. A blink erased it. Exhaustion, surely. Nerves frayed thin. Further along, I discovered a neglected sitting room, adrift in time, furnished with spectral armchairs draped in faded floral prints. A low table displayed yellowed brochures chronicling the hotel's bygone galas. Tucked amongst them lay a photograph, monochrome and curling at its edges, capturing this very corridor in a previous incarnation. Guests, starched and severe, posed against the familiar damask walls. The mirrors gleamed, identical, and there, melting into the background near a doorway, stood a tall figure, indistinct, head inclined, as if eavesdropping on secrets whispered across decades. No caption offered a name, only the spectral annotation on celluloid. Retrieving the photograph, a sudden chill raised goose flesh on my arms despite the stagnant air. Night descended once more, thick and absolute. As a flimsy precaution, I wedged a chair beneath the brass doorknob. The footsteps commenced with unnerving punctuality, their rhythm a slow, hypnotic beat against the floorboards. I lay rigid in bed, the counterpane clutched to my chin, concentrating on the mechanics of breath. An illusion, I chanted internally, a trick of the mind. Then the handle rattled, a tentative probing that escalated into a determined turning. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Leaning up, slick with sudden perspiration, I watched the knob twist insistently, the chair held firm. A profound silence followed. No knock, no voice, offered explanation. Heart thudding, I crept towards the door. The instant my eye met the peephole, the corridor stretched empty and still under the low light. Utterly deserted. It was then I sensed the disturbance behind me. I spun, heart leaping. The heavy window curtain stirred, a languid sway in the utterly inert air. The radiator emitted a low hiss, but no draft whispered through the room. A faint, cloying scent touched the air. Old perfume, perhaps, or the must of disturbed dust from some forgotten recess. Stumbling backward over my own luggage, a visceral certainty coiled in my gut. Something shared this space. Sleep became an impossibility. Hours crawled by. Then, in the grey hour preceding dawn, I heard it inside the room. The soft crush of footsteps on the carpet, quiet but irrefutable. I bolted upright, vision swimming. My palms were damp, my chest constricted. Reaching for the bedside lamp, I flicked the switch. Nothing. Yet I felt an intangible presence brush past, raising the fine hairs along my forearms. Straining my ears, I caught a delicate scuff near the antique dresser. When I forced my gaze towards the wall, a shadow stretched there, impossibly long and slender, swaying gently without discernible source or caster. Tears welled, hot and stinging. A scream felt futile, swallowed by the isolation I had so desperately sought. Who would hear? Morning brought cessation. I descended, confronting Mr. Finch with forced calm. Is anyone else accommodated on my floor? His smile was a taut line, tinged with discomfort. No, sir. The entire level is yours. I pressed him about spare keys, about access. He offered only vague demurrals about the building's venerable age, mentioning other guests reporting odd sounds, though assuring me no actual harm had ever transpired. His eyes, however, pleaded for the conversation's end. Trouble was unwelcome here. He suggested a room on a lower floor. Yet, inexplicably, I refused. A perverse compulsion anchored me, a sense that something in that echoing corridor desired my presence, and a stubborn fragment of my will demanded understanding. That afternoon became a meticulous examination. I scrutinized the door, the lock. I even snatched the chair away and flung the door open precisely when the spectral pacing usually began, hoping to expose a prankster. Emptiness greeted me. My phone, deployed as a recorder, captured only the ambient creaks of the old hotel. I walked the corridor again, tracing the ornate frames of the mirrors, dust lodging beneath my fingernails. At one point, I pressed my face close to the large, rippled glass. My reflection stared back, pallid eyes webbed with red, hair plastered to my brow with sweat. As I held its gaze, a flicker danced at the edge of vision. I fought for composure. Then, undeniably, a shape drifted behind my reflected self. I whirled around. The corridor remained vacant, though the mirror's surface seemed to shimmer, vibrating almost imperceptibly. By the third night, my composure had fractured. The pacing recommenced outside, punctual as a death knell. The handle turned, a gentle coaxing that grew forceful. I barricaded the door with my suitcase, adding its weight to the chair's meager defense. Soft scraping sounds whispered against the wood, punctuated by something that might have been breath, ragged and slow, drawn close to the keyhole. Retreating to the bed, the metallic taste of fear coated my tongue. Shadows in the room deepened, pooling like spilled ink. The curtains performed their silent ballet. Denial was a flimsy shield against the tremor racking my body. Then, the final violation. The footfalls crossed the threshold, circling the bed. My hand groped for the lamp switch. It remained inert. I tried to rise, but an immense weight settled on my shoulders. A silent pressing admonition. The air grew thick, redolent of decay, of attics sealed for generations. Gritting my teeth, I activated the small torch on my phone. Its weak beam illuminated only empty air. Yet, projected onto the far wall, the impossible shadow returned, elongated and stark, its head tilted in precisely the manner of the figure in the old photograph. Leave me alone. The plea tore from my raw throat, a ragged croak. No response came, only a profound, listening silence that felt chillingly patient, waiting for my surrender. My thoughts scattered like frightened birds. Flee. Abandon the room, the hotel, this waking nightmare? But as I lurched towards the door, the knob rattled violently, accompanied by the familiar, rhythmic tread resuming its patrol in the hall. It held me captive, this presence, looping my terror. In a desperate, irrational act, I seized a bedsheet and flung it over the large mirror in the corridor, hoping to blind it. Stepping back inside my room, however, the footsteps seemed to follow, imbued with an almost mocking quality. I reset the chair, my breath coming in ragged gasps, sweat stinging my eyes. Leaning against the door for support, I realized I was trembling too violently to stand unaided. Sometime near dawn, Adrift in sleepless delirium, I tore through the dresser drawers. Beneath yellowed hotel stationery, I found it. A guest's note penned in elegant, faded cursive. I cannot leave this room. He walks the halls each night, and when I look through the mirror, I see him behind me. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Not the first. Decades apart, the same terror played out. This entity didn't seek harm, but entrapment. It fed on awareness, thrived in the reflection of fear. Each night a siege, each dawn a temporary truce. Drawing a shuddering breath, heart battering my ribs, I returned to the shrouded mirror in the hall. With a sharp tug, I tore the sheet away and forced myself to look. For one sickening, elongated moment, the glass held more than my own haggard face. Behind me, impossibly close, loomed a tall silhouette, leaning in, spectral fingers hovering near my shoulder, its form warped and sinister in the antique glass. I blinked hard, and the corridor was empty once more. But the knowledge remained, cold and certain. It was there, waiting, always waiting. I stumbled back into the room, slammed the door, and braced my weight against it. Morning light, thin and pale, offered a fragile reprieve. My body ached, muscles screaming, as if from exertion. Departure was no longer a choice, but a necessity. I packed with frantic haste, the skin on my neck prickling with unseen attention. Reaching the threshold, the doorknob resisted, sticking fast. I wrenched it, the wood groaning in protest, until it finally yielded. The corridor lay silent. I practically ran towards the elevator, suitcase wheels rattling frantically behind me. Beside the brass elevator doors hung another mirror, smaller but just as old. My reflection confronted me. A man ravaged, marked by nights of escalating terror. As I leaned closer, attempting to smooth my collar, to regain some semblance of composure, I saw it. My reflection's eyes held a depth, a darkness that wasn't my own. Its posture seemed subtly altered, and hovering just behind this mirrored double, faint but distinct, was the familiar outline. The tall figure. It lingered there, at the very edge of perception, as if it had somehow slipped inside, or bound itself so tightly to my fear that separation was impossible. The elevator chimed its arrival. Before stepping into the descending cage, I cast one final glance at the mirror. My breath hitched, my reflection offered a faint, knowing smile, an expression I swear I did not consciously make. Nausea churned within me. I recoiled, nearly upending my luggage. The corridor was utterly still, yet the echo of pacing footsteps persisted in my inner ear, the steady tread of something that clung fast. I fled the building moments later, but walking away, I felt an alien tension settle in my shoulders, a lingering stiffness. Later, catching my reflection in a shop window downtown, I thought I glimpsed a shadow at my back, unnaturally tall. I looked again. It was gone, but the certainty has evaporated. Perhaps I carried it with me after all, that watchful presence, now nested deep within the architecture of my own fear. Perhaps I will forever feel that phantom pressure on the doorknob, hear that quiet cadence in the halls of my mind, and see, in every polished surface, that distorted shape hovering, waiting patiently to be noticed again. Ignorance was my sole companion, stepping onto that sun-scorched expanse. The plateau's furnace breath hitting my face like a physical blow. Above, the sun hung pitilessly at its zenith. My boots sank slightly into earth, baked hard, a mosaic of cracks webbing the red-brown rock that stretched, indifferent and vast, to every horizon. Whispers of anomalous rock formations, geological oddities defying the region's predictable strata, had lured me here. Nothing more profound was anticipated. My pack felt meager against my back, holding only water, nutrient paste, and a camera. My vehicle, a distant metal speck, waited miles behind where sand yielded to unforgiving stone. I wandered through a gallery of scattered boulders, some aspiring to height, others jagged and low-slung, casualties of time. Hours dissolved under the relentless sky as I scribbled notes, captured images, tracked the sun's slow arc, a parched throat, sweat tracing cool paths down my temples and neck. The desert's familiar toll. Silence reigned, profound, but for the crunch of my own passage, the sigh of an almost imperceptible breeze, and the insistent drumming of my pulse within my ears. Each step was a negotiation with the uneven terrain, a conscious effort against the threat of a twisted ankle. Precisely when the pattern emerged from the randomness, I cannot say. Perhaps my subconscious registered the improbable order first. From afar, a congregation of upright stones hinted at structure. I advanced, deliberation slowing my pace. My mouth felt tacky. I paused, rationing a sip of water. Closer now, the perfection resolved. A circle, stark against the plateau floor. The stones, roughly waist-high, stood uniformly spaced, the gaps between them just wide enough for passage, turned sideways. 12 silent sentinels formed the ring. I circled them, tracing their perimeter. No pigment marred their surfaces. Only the rough texture of weathered stone, etched with fine fissures. Their alignment possessed an undeniable precision, though its celestial or terrestrial significance eluded me. An ancient observatory, perhaps. A forgotten ritual site. Shielding my eyes against the brutal afternoon glare, I scanned the heavens. The light felt abrasive. A faint sting on my arms signaled the sun's trespass. A decision coalesced. I would remain, witness the sunset's interplay with this enigmatic construction. My pack yielded a compact shelter and sufficient water for a vigil. Near the circle, I settled, consulting my watch as the day bled slowly towards evening. The sky's pale canvas ignited, transforming into washes of incandescent orange and bruised purple. More photographs were taken, crouching low, fingers tracing the sandpaper roughness of the ancient stones. With the sun's final plunge below the horizon, the temperature plummeted. A thin mat unrolled, a single pole tent erected, meager defenses against the encroaching chill. I lit a small lantern, keeping its glow minimal, preserving the celestial theater above. The air grew teeth. Goose flesh prickled my skin. The quiet intensified, absolute now, devoid even of insectile hum or whispering wind, leaving only the sound of my own respiration. Rising, I paced the circle's exterior again, the beam of my flashlight sweeping the ground to prevent a stumble. Then I stopped. Movement flickered at the circle's heart. A trick of the failing light, I reasoned initially. The moon, a slender crescent, offered only skeletal illumination. Yet, as I edged nearer, flashlight beam trembling, the shapes within the ring gained definition, or rather defied it. Dark figures coalesced, anthropomorphic yet featureless, silhouettes cut from profoundest night. They moved, a synchronized, languid sway, a slow-motion ballet of shadows. A knot of ice formed in my gut. My grip tightened on the flashlight. I remained outside the stones, perhaps 30 feet distant, mouth agape, breath catching in my throat. My heart began a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I directed the light towards them, but the beam passed through, finding no purchase, confirming their insubstantial nature. Undeterred, they continued their silent drifting dance, lifting phantom limbs, lowering them in hypnotic rhythm. My legs turned to lead. A low buzzing commenced in my skull. Swallowing against a suddenly dry throat, I wrestled with logic. Flee? Seek refuge in the tent? Scrabble for my pack and bolt into the darkness? Yet paralysis held me fast. I watched, mesmerized, until a chilling certainty dawned. They were aware of me. Faceless, eyeless, yet their collective attention settled upon me like a physical weight. My flashlight sputtered, blinked. I shook it uselessly. A faint chime from my watch marked the late hour. Moonlight bleached the landscape, rendering the stone circle starker, the shadow figures within darker still. Abruptly, their dance ceased. They froze, poised in mid-gesture. The air constricted, pressing against my chest. The frantic pulse in my ears became the only sound in the universe. Then one lifted an arm, its movement uncannily echoing the way I held my own flashlight. I recoiled instinctively, a step back, and the figure mirrored me, its form distorting, stretching unnaturally. My own arms began to shake. I fought for composure, my breath escaping in ragged bursts. Another shade tilted its head. My own head followed suit, an involuntary mimicry. A dull ringing filled my ears. Each twitch, each turn of my head was replicated within the circle, but warped, their limbs elongating as if pulled by unseen forces at the edge of darkness. My scalp prickled. The urge to run screamed, yet an invisible force pinned me. My legs trembled violently. My throat closed. The figures shifted constantly now, testing the boundaries of their shadowy forms. Finally, summoning will, I forced another step backward, stumbling over a loose rock. One of the shadows jerked in grotesque sympathy, its torso twisting impossibly. A sound reached me then, faint, dry. A hiss, or perhaps the scrape of fingernails on stone. I extinguished the flashlight. In the dim moonlight, the shadows remained visible, outlined by a faint internal luminescence, like holes burned in the fabric of night. Cold sweat beaded on my neck. Then came the pull, a visceral, undeniable compulsion originating deep within my core. A tether tightening behind my navel, drawing me toward the circle. My mind shrieked resistance. My heart hammered, as if seeking escape from my chest, but my feet yearned to move forward. My entire being felt magnetized to that central point. I dug my heels into the resistant earth, clenched my fists, fighting the escalating urge, an itch beneath the skin demanding to be scratched. A glance towards my tent offered little solace. Flimsy fabric felt laughably inadequate. Proximity itself felt like contamination. My gaze returned to the shadows. They swayed again, slowly, expectantly. A breeze stirred, the first real wind since sunset, chilling my sweat-dampened face. My left foot moved. It simply lifted and stepped forward, independent of my will. The shadows raised their arms in unison. A low hum vibrated the air, felt more than heard. I tried to regulate my breathing, each inhalation shallow, rapid. Another step, mind screaming, stop. Body surrendering. I tried to shout, but only a trembling whisper emerged, swallowed by the vastness. Stop it. I locked my right foot, throwing my weight back, but the ground itself seemed complicit, urging me onward. 10 feet separated me from the ring. The stones loomed larger, their surfaces revealing intricate networks of scratches I hadn't perceived before, patterns hinting at a forgotten language. The dusty air filled my nostrils, parching my tongue. Another unsteady half-step forward. The shadows pulsed, seeming to swell, growing taller, drawn to my approach. The hum intensified, resonating in my sternum, rattling my ribs. Wind gusted across the mesa, whipping dust into my eyes. I blinked, rubbed them, vision momentarily blurring. Through the haze, the figures flickered, yet still they mirrored me. My hand rose to wipe sweat from my brow. Their phantom hands lifted in that same distorted, mocking gesture. Drawing a ragged breath, eyes stinging, I stood transfixed. A desperate desire to break the invisible tether, warred with the inexorable pull, collapse felt imminent. Yet another step carried me forward. Mere feet now from the stone perimeter. Reaching out, I could have brushed a cool, rough surface. Adrenaline surged, tingling in my fingertips, churning my stomach. I strained backward, body refusing, locked on its trajectory into the circle's embrace. My pulse thundered, sweat slicked my face. As I wiped my cheek, my hand trembled uncontrollably. The shadows parted fluidly, creating an opening directly before me, an invitation into their midst. I stepped between two stones. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath hitched. The ground beneath felt subtly softer, yielding. Knees threatening to buckle, I saw my own shadow stretch before me in the moonlight, yet it lagged, its movements disconnected, catching up a split second after my own. A faint grinding underfoot, like crushing tiny shells. The hum enveloped me, filling my skull. Edging towards the center, the shadow figures closed in, surrounding me, circling in slow, deliberate arcs. The air thickened with the scent of dust and something else. A faint whiff of sulfur. My eyes watered. The pounding in my chest became painful. Their limbs extended, forming a wide, shifting cordon around me. Every shift of weight, every nervous twitch of my fingers elicited an immediate, distorted echo from the ring of shades. A tingling numbness crept into my fingertips. A heavy ache settled in my calves. Thoughts fragmented, coherent planning impossible. My focus narrowed solely to the silent, watchful forms. No eyes, no mouths, just outlines of heads, torsos, limbs. They maintained a distance of several feet, yet effectively blocked all egress. I turned my head, searching for a gap. They turned with me. My breath came in shallow, inadequate gasps. "Let me out," I rasped, the sound pitifully small. No response, but the heads tilted in perfect, unsettling unison. I raised my hands, palms out, a gesture of placation. My muscles felt like stone. They mirrored the movement, phantom arms lifting. My chest tightened further. A faint, vibrational rattling ascended my spine. A slow step backward toward the nearest gap between stones. They flowed forward, maintaining the circle, denying escape. My legs gave way. I crumpled to my knees, panting, the sour taste of fear in my mouth. Grit coated my tongue, provoking a gag reflex. Head bowed, I remained there for moments, feeling the rough earth beneath my knees. The humming softened fractionally. Slowly, I lifted my head. The shadows swayed gently, waiting. My heartbeat throbbed in my ears, arms like leaden weights. I forced myself upright again, knees trembling. I attempted a sideways shuffle. The ring shifted with me, seamless, synchronized. Turning, scanning the impassive stones, my dead flashlight dangled uselessly. My thumb found the switch. A weak, flickering beam stabbed at the darkness, illuminating the nearest figures. They wavered, shimmered. A wave of vertigo washed over me. The compulsion to remain held fast, cold seeped into my bones. My shirt clung, damp and chilling, to my back. Swallowing felt like forcing down sandpaper. A sharp crack behind me, my own foot connecting with the stone, shattered the silence. I spun, and the shadows twitched violently. The flashlight beam faltered again. In that instant, instinct overrode paralysis. Though balance felt precarious, I lunged, aiming for the space between two wavering forms. They seemed to part, yielding just enough, then flowed back together as I stumbled through, scraping my hand raw against the unforgiving edge of a pillar stone. A hiss of pain escaped my lips, but momentum carried me forward. Several frantic steps, then I risked a glance back. The shadows remained within the circle, swaying once more. Their strange dance resumed. They did not pursue. My breath tore through my lungs, ragged and burning. Blood welled from the gash on my hand. I smeared it absently on my trousers. Tears blurred my vision, born of terror and stinging dust. One final look. The dark figures, raising their arms to the crescent moon, dancing. The hum faded from my awareness. Tremors racked my body. I forced myself away, each step heavy, uncertain. I refused to look back again until I reached the relative sanctuary of my campsite. Turning then, heart pounding, I saw only the circle of stones, silent and inert under the moon. I collapsed onto my sleeping mat, shaking uncontrollably. The air outside the ring still felt oppressive, heavy, but blessedly free of that chilling presence. Sleep was a forgotten country. My eyes remained open, ceaselessly scanning the plateau, tracing the moon's slow journey across the star-dusted obsidian sky. Wind rose and fell, whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. Dawn arrived, painting the east with tentative light. I rose stiffly, dismantled the tent with numb fingers, took a final survey of the horizon. The stones stood as they had for centuries, perhaps millennia, betraying nothing in the morning sun. No hint of the night's phantoms remained. My legs felt unsteady as I began the long walk back, not running, but maintaining a determined pace, glancing compulsively over my shoulder. The sun's warmth on my back felt alien. My lips were cracked and dry. Every recall of the shadow figures sent a jolt through my system. Reaching the car felt like breaching the surface after drowning. I threw my pack onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, the sound unnaturally loud. My reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, pale, strained. eyes haunted. Starting the engine, I drove, putting miles between myself and that high, lonely place as quickly as the terrain allowed. No destination in mind, only distance. My thoughts remained tangled, refusing explanation. The memory remains visceral, undeniable. A cold knot tightening in my stomach whenever it surfaces. Those stones, that circle, those things, what they were, I'll never know. I only know the certainty of my desire to never, ever return. Again, the drapes in Silas Blackwood's front window shivered, a subtle tremor against the pre-dawn stillness. 3 o'clock. A phantom chill traced my vertebrae. For the third consecutive night, his silhouette had materialized there, a stark cutout against the faint interior light, gazing into the impenetrable umbra cloaking our street. A profound wrongness emanated from the house next door, a disquiet that promised to unravel the placid tapestry of our suburban enclave. Nearly half a decade I'd resided beside Mr. Blackwood. In that span, he'd been the archetype of the amiable, albeit withdrawn, elder neighbor, guardian of my empty house during my travels, recipient of my reciprocal lawn mowing and snow clearing efforts. But the equilibrium had fractured. Subtle dissonances arrived first. Newly installed deadbolts bristled on every door, every window frame. Then, the surveillance cameras manifested, crimson eyes blinking with unnerving vigilance from the eaves and corners of his property. Initially, I attributed it to the creeping anxieties of advancing age. Silas was nearing 80 after all, and solitude can breed phantoms. Yet, the nocturnal sentry duty commenced. Roused by mundane midnight needs, I'd glimpse him, statue still at his window, focus fixed on some unseen point in the void. Daylight brought no respite. He'd scuttle from his sedan to the sanctuary of his front door, head darting, scanning the periphery as if anticipating ambush. Once, I ventured a casual probe, remarking on his apparent tension. The reaction was jarring. His eyes dilated, a flash of naked terror momentarily eclipsing his composure. Then he forced brittle chuckle. "Ah, well," he rasped, "one must exercise caution in these times, mustn't one?" Before another word could form, he'd vanished inside, the decisive slam of his door punctuating the exchange. That brief, unsettling encounter replayed ceaselessly as I stood sentinel at my own window, mirroring his shadowed form. Logic dictated retreat, a return to bed, adherence to the unspoken code of minding one's own affairs. Yet, an insistent internal current defied reason. The mystery demanded illumination. The following morning, feigning illness, I watched him depart for his invaluable 10 a.m. grocery run. The moment his car rounded the corner, I moved. A trespasser's guilt gnawed as I traversed the shared expanse of lawn, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Just checking, I rationalized. A neighborly welfare check. A flimsy pretext masking the undeniable transgression. The front door yielded unexpectedly to my touch, swinging inward with a soft sigh. Silence reigned within, thick with the scent of aged paper, binding glue, and an underlying unidentifiable tang. At first glance, normalcy prevailed. An immaculate parlor, framed visages smiling from the mantelpiece. A half-consumed mug of coffee cooling on an end table. Deeper exploration fractured the illusion. Miniature lenses lurked everywhere, secreted behind artwork, nestled in ceiling corners. One ingeniously camouflaged within a terracotta pot. The kitchen counter held a stack of spiral notebooks, pages dense with cryptic notations juxtaposed against precise times. A tremor began in my hands as I ascended the staircase. Absurd, I chided myself. Surely a benign explanation existed. Perhaps Silas harbored a late-life passion for espionage fiction, or merely an obsessive dedication to home security. The upstairs corridor presented a series of closed doors. The first resisted, locked fast. The second likewise. The third, situated at the hall's terminus, groaned open, the sound amplifying unnaturally in the stillness. I stepped across the threshold and froze. Darkness dominated, pierced only by the spectral luminescence of myriad computer monitors. Each screen displayed a different vista. Our street rendered in ghostly night vision, the interiors of adjacent homes, local storefronts. Horror dawned with chilling clarity. These were live feeds, a comprehensive surveillance network blanketing the entire neighborhood. And there, starkly displayed on one monitor, was the familiar geography of my own living room. My thoughts fragmented, struggling to reconcile the image of Silas Blackwood, purveyor of welcoming baked goods upon my arrival, with this clandestine architect of pervasive observation. For what conceivable purpose? So consumed was I by the staggering revelation that the sound of the front door opening downstairs barely registered. Barely. The noise electrified me, plunging me into raw panic. Silas returned prematurely, and I ensnared within the nerve center of his secret world. My eyes darted, seeking refuge in the sparsely furnished room. Only the closet offered concealment. I scrambled inside, pulling the door almost shut just as his tread sounded on the stairs. Through the narrow aperture, I watched him enter, moving with an air of focused routine. He settled before the console, fingers flying across the keyboard, low murmurs escaping his lips. I held my breath, each pulse echoing like a thunderclap in the confined space. Time stretched, distorted. Minutes elongated into agonizing eternities as I observed his solitary work. Eventually, he rose and departed the room. Only when his footsteps receded down the stairs did I dare emerge, limbs stiff, heart hammering against my ribs. Escape was imperative, yet the gnawing need for understanding held me captive. I crept towards the glowing monitors, eyes scanning the mosaic of captured lives. Then I saw it. A document displayed prominently on the central screen. Operation Aegis Precinct, Surveillance Report, the header proclaimed. Scanning the text, disparate pieces began to coalesce. Silas Blackwood was no mere paranoid elder. He was a ghost from the world of shadows, a former intelligence operative. The report outlined a mandate: monitor the precinct for potential threats. But threats against what? The narrative grew increasingly opaque. The objective veiled in jargon and illusion. Suddenly, a firm hand clamped onto my shoulder. I whirled, gasping, to find Silas standing directly behind me. His gaze glacial, devoid of its customary warmth. I had hoped, he stated, his voice unnervingly level, to avoid this eventuality. I've always favored you, you understand. But curiosity, left unchecked, invites peril. My mouth opened to stammer an apology, to plead, but sound failed me. Silas sighed, a profound exhalation of weariness. An explanation is owed, I concede, he said, gesturing towards the chair before the console. Be warned, however, once this knowledge is yours, retreat is impossible. For a fleeting instant, flight seemed the only sane option. But where? And who would lend credence to such an outlandish tale? Slowly, compelled by a force beyond reason, I sank into the chair, my gaze locked onto his impassive face. He began to speak, and with each unfolding revelation, the foundations of my reality crumbled. Silas wasn't merely observing our neighborhood. He was its clandestine guardian, protecting it from forces, from entities that existed beyond the periphery of common perception. Our unremarkable suburban street, it transpired, rested upon something of immense value, something inherently dangerous, a secret coveted by powerful, ruthless factions. Silas's lifelong charge had been to ensure its continued concealment, to preserve the fragile illusion of normalcy. But why reveal this to me? I managed my voice thin. Why not eliminate the complication? A flicker of something akin to warmth softened his features. Because, he replied, the years accumulate. This burden, it exceeds the capacity of one man. I have observed you, Elara, for a long time, awaiting the opportune moment. You possess acuity, resourcefulness, and crucially, a genuine concern for this community. I believe you are prepared to assume the mantle. My mind reeled, caught in the turbulent wake of his disclosures. Hours ago, my greatest concern was a neighbor's eccentricity. Now I stood on the precipice of an unseen war. A primal urge screamed for denial, for flight, for a return to blissful ignorance. But as my eyes drifted back to the monitors, to the familiar faces of neighbors, individuals I'd shared pleasantries and borrowed sugar from, I recognized the impossibility of abdication. What must I do? The question escaped my lips, seemingly of its own volition. Silas Blackwood allowed himself a faint smile, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders. Firstly, he declared, we must enhance your domestic security infrastructure. You will require significantly more cameras. Leaving Silas Blackwood's house later that day, the familiar sunlight seemed diminished, the world cast in a subtly darker hue. Yet, alongside the fear, a novel sense of purpose resonated within me. I was no longer merely a resident. I was a custodian, a sentinel, now ensconced within my own burgeoning command center, monitoring the silent feeds, safeguarding our profound secret. I occasionally glimpsed my former self reflected in the myriad lenses, untroubled, oblivious to the veiled perils beneath our quiet street. A vestige of me mourns that lost innocence, but predominantly, gratitude prevails. Gratitude for the truth, however terrifying its dimensions. Because in this shadowed reality, knowledge is not merely power, it is the currency of survival. That particular night remains etched, a corrosive memory I cannot scrub clean. The task was ostensibly simple, a final sweep through a subterranean relic, a skeletal subway station sealed off from the pulse of the city for years. unwanted duty naturally, relegated to whoever drew the short straw. Most personnel steered clear unless mandated for routine checks. I'd navigated similar derelict spaces before, yet none possessed this profound sense of isolation, this palpable detachment. Whispers circulated among the crews, aberrant noises, phantom flickers in the gloom, tales I'd always mentally filed under imagination fueled by darkness. My disposition leans towards the pragmatic. I prefer efficiency over theatrics. But that evening, deep beneath the indifferent streets, I learned that some stations harbor more than mere dust motes, dancing in flashlight beams. Midnight had just tolled when I reached the skeletal maw of the entrance. A heavy security grille barred the way, yielding only to a specialized key. Kessler, my foreman, had briefed me with practiced nonchalance. Just a quick pass, Elias. Check for vandalism, vagrants, structural breaches, nothing complicated. His tone suggested a trivial errand. I recalled the low thrum of the utility lights in the access corridor, a lonely sound just before the descent began. Power lingered here, inexplicably, while the station proper slumbered in near-total blackness. My heavy-duty flashlight sliced the air as I stepped onto the first concrete stair. A faint groan answered my weight, my own footfalls amplifying into hollow booms within the cavernous space. Initially, it was just as expected. Stale air, layers of grime, the quietude of abandonment. The stairwell spilled onto the main platform. A damp, mineral scent pervaded the atmosphere, hinting at slow seepage through aged concrete. The floor, a mosaic of weary tiles, showed its age with chips and cracks. Walls clad in dull white ceramic squares offered fragmented, distorted reflections of my light. The beam crawled across the floor, then climbed the walls, illuminating familiar detritus. Tattered advertisements peeling like dead skin. The carcass of a vending machine slumped in a corner. Drifts of refuse likely predating my own existence. The place wasn't peacefully dormant. It felt charged with a static unease, a tension that clung to the stagnant air. A rhythmic drip echoed from somewhere distant, magnified by the acoustics until it mimicked deliberate tapping. I swept my light around, seeking the source. That's when a faint shimmer snagged my attention on a section of wall tiles. My own distorted likeness stared back, fragmented across several squares. Less a reflection and more a warped mosaic of me. I shifted the beam. The fragmented image followed. A tilt of my head produced a corresponding movement in the ceramic. A peculiar optical trick, I reasoned, born of angle and grime. I dismissed it. I resumed my patrol, boots crunching softly on the accumulated grit. Periodically, I paused, directing my beam downwards to inspect the platform's integrity, dutifully noting any potential hazards. Years out of commission meant anticipating decay. Aside from the pervasive neglect, however, the structure seemed fundamentally sound. My clipboard collected mundane observations. Fractured tile near stairs, graffiti, second passage, water ingress, far end. Straightforward, routine. Yet, with unsettling frequency, my gaze drifted back to the walls, catching those fragmented reflections. Then, a disquieting inconsistency emerged. Sometimes the reflections seemed plural, a fleeting impression of an additional shoulder, the curve of an unseen head, always lurking at the periphery of the tiled surfaces. Direct illumination revealed only empty platform, vacant corridor. Fatigue, I told myself. Late hours warp perception, especially in environments steeped in gloom. A faint nausea stirred in my gut. I consciously steadied my breathing. Reaching the platform's terminus, I peered down at the tracks, rusted parallels receding into debris-choked darkness. My flashlight beam devoured the light, revealing only impenetrable shadow and scattered rubble beyond its reach. The air hung heavy here, thick with the smell of damp iron. My watch read 12:20 a.m. My self-imposed deadline was 1 a.m. Lingering served no purpose. Turning back, I heard it. A distinct scrape, the sound of a shoe sole dragging lightly against the tiled floor. My heart leaped. I froze, straining my ears. Silence returned. A rat, perhaps, shifting debris? Plausible explanations warred with a surge of adrenaline. My pulse quickened. A swift 360-degree sweep of the flashlight confirmed my solitude amidst the dust and decay. I pressed onward, nerves now taut. My own breathing sounded loud, uneven. Sweat slicked my palms. I wiped one absently on my trousers. My eyes scanned the walls compulsively. The reflections persisted, but now conviction replaced suspicion. I saw the definite outline of a human form, briefly, starkly silhouetted on the tile surface, positioned as if someone stood across the platform. Yet, when my beam swung instantly to that spot, nothing. A choked laugh escaped me, thin and unconvincing. I reached the dilapidated waiting area. Splintered wooden benches sagged, ghosts of past commuters. Yellowed, brittle newspapers lay scattered like fallen leaves. I stooped to read a headline. Some forgotten mayoral race. Trivial history. As I straightened, my light fell upon the wall opposite. And there it was, sharper this time. A silhouette. Head and shoulders clearly defined against the ceramic glaze. It couldn't be my reflection. I stood too far away. It simply existed, poised as if directly behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my throat. I spun, flashlight beam stabbing the air behind me. Empty space. Turning back to the wall, the silhouette had vanished. A tremor started in my legs. Rational thought struggled against rising panic. A trick of the light? A patch of stubborn grime mimicking form? Possible, yet unconvincing. The desire to finish, to escape, became urgent. My checklist was nearly complete. Only the far stairwell remained. I steered myself towards it, forcing myself not to dwell on the apparitions glimpsed on the periphery. Each step feeling heavier, more reluctant than the last. I entered a narrow connecting passage, linking platforms. Here, the overhead lights were utterly dead. My flashlight beam was a solitary intruder in the profound darkness. The tiled walls were slick with grime, mold blooming in the corners like dark blossoms. Halfway through, movement flickered at the edge of my vision. I stopped dead, chest tightening. My beam snapped to the wall. There, reflected with unnerving clarity, was a human profile. Distinct chin, nose, the unmistakable curve of a shoulder. I stood rooted, breath catching. The reflection seemed to subtly shift, turning, as if observing me. My mouth was desert dry. I took a hesitant step forward. The reflection mirrored the movement, gliding across the tile surface in eerie synchrony. I raised my arm. The shadowed shape on the wall raised its own. My pulse roared. This is madness, I thought. There's no one here. It can't be real. I swept the flashlight beam rapidly across the wall. The reflection flickered, momentarily disrupted, then coalesced again. But now its movements seemed slightly asynchronous, lagging or anticipating my own. I broke into a hurried walk, eyes fixed firmly ahead, refusing to look at the walls. My boot heels clicked sharply on the tiles, breath echoing raggedly. Reaching the next stairwell, I paused, gasping for air, the thudding in my ears deafening. Against my better judgment, I forced myself to look at the adjacent wall, needing to disprove the impossible. This time, mercifully, only my own familiar, fragmented reflection greeted me. I let out a long, shuddering exhale, attempting to regain control. I ascended the stairs. At the top lay a small secondary platform entrance, sealed off even longer than the main station. Faded signage whispered of forgotten routes. The street access gate was chained and padlocked. I checked the chain, gave it a perfunctory tug. Secure. It was then I heard them. Footsteps, faint yet undeniable. Soft impacts on tile, originating from behind me, down the stairs I had just climbed. I whirled around, flashlight beam slashing the darkness. Nothing. Only the lingering echo of those phantom steps resonated in the hollow space. Enough. The inspection was functionally complete. Comprehensive checks be damned. Escape was the only imperative now. I turned to retrace my steps, but the corridor seemed to have swallowed the light, appearing deeper, darker than moments before. My flashlight beam felt diminished, or perhaps fear was constricting my pupils. I moved quickly, almost stumbling on the damp floor. The footstep sounds returned, multiplied. They seemed to emanate from behind, then beside me. A soft shuffling cadence, suggesting multiple unseen walkers pacing me in the dark. Again and again I spun, beam-cutting arcs through the blackness, revealing nothing but empty decaying station. Panic hammered at my ribs. My mouth tasted foul, metallic. My hands shook violently, causing the flashlight beam to tremble erratically across the walls. And then I saw them. Not directly, but their reflections. Multiple shapes, stark black silhouettes against the glossy tiles. Not ethereal wisps, but solid-looking voids shaped like human figures. They moved on the ceramic surfaces, seeming to converge, drawing nearer with each hesitant step I took backward. My chest constricted. Heat flushed my face. I retreated, directing my beam at the floor, desperate to avoid the wall-bound watchers. But they were on the floor too, reflected in the slick patches of dampness where the tiles gleamed wetly. I broke into a shambling run, disoriented, unsure of my path. My boot slipped. I threw out a hand, bracing myself against the cold wall. The tile felt frigid beneath my palm, and for one heart-stopping instant, I felt, or imagined I felt, a faint pressure, a fleeting brush against my hand, as if from the other side of the ceramic barrier. I snatched my hand back as if burned, nearly dropping the flashlight. I forced myself onward, breath tearing through my lungs. The station twisted around me, a labyrinth of identical corridors and stairwells. I knew the main exit lay back the way I'd come, yet every direction offered only deepening darkness. My flashlight beam flickered ominously. No, not now. A frantic shake and the light steadied blessedly. But the reflections were everywhere, on every available surface. Some near, some distant. A silent, encroaching crowd. Finally, through the oppressive gloom, I recognized the main stairwell leading upward to the security gate. Relief surged, potent but fragile. I scrambled towards it, tripping over broken tiles, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The phantom footsteps seemed louder now, a rhythmic marching closing in. I refused to look back. Reaching the base of the stairs, I risked a final glance at the large tile panel to my right. 4, maybe 5 distinct silhouettes were reflected there, spaced apart, all oriented towards me. My chest felt ready to implode. Questions screamed in my mind, unanswered, unanswerable. Leaving was the only thought. I took the stairs too, 3 at a time, gripping the cold metal handrail until my knuckles ached. At the top, the security gate loomed. My shaking hand fumbled with the key, dropping it with a clatter that echoed unnervingly. Crouching to retrieve it, my eyes caught a glint of the gate's metal surface. Reflections. The silhouettes were massing at the foot of the stairs, advancing. A low, pervasive scraping sound arose. The whisper of dozens of shuffling feet. Numb fingers struggled with the lock. The key finally turned. The gate shrieked open. I plunged through, slammed it shut behind me, twisting the key again, locking it tight. My breath hitched in ragged sobs. I leaned my forehead against the cool, solid metal, trying to anchor myself. After a moment, I forced myself to look back through the grille. The corridor beyond was a void. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness at the top of the stairs. No movement, no reflections, just black silence. A shaky sigh escaped me. My heart still galloped. My clothes clung, damp with cold sweat. I backed away from the gate, moving towards the final door leading to the surface. The single utility light in this small vestibule buzzed persistently, casting a sickly yellow glow. Running felt impossible. My legs were leaden. I moved as fast as I could, each step a loud intrusion in the quiet. Pushing open the street-level door felt like surfacing from underwater. Cool night air rushed in, and I drank it down greedily. Outside, streetlights cast pools of ordinary orange light. The city hummed its usual oblivious rhythm. I stood hunched over, hands on knees, fighting for breath. My whole body trembling, my throat felt raw. A glance back at the door revealed only my own reflection in the glass. No dark shapes followed me into the world above. I stumbled to my truck, fumbled with the lock, slid inside, and immediately locked the doors. My hands still shook too badly to easily insert the key into the ignition. When the engine finally caught, I sat there, headlights blazing, staring at the station entrance. From the outside, it looked innocuous. Just another locked door, another warning sign. Minutes passed before the trembling subsided enough to drive. Sweat plastered my shirt to my back. A persistent, irrational feeling lingered. That someone sat silently beside me in the passenger seat. But I was alone. Back at the depot, I handed the clipboard to Kessler wordlessly. He gave me a questioning look, likely noting my pallor, the residual tremor. He started to ask something, but I muttered an excuse about feeling unwell and made my exit. The rest of that night, and many nights since, have been spent grappling with the memory. Logic dictates it was nerves, exhaustion, tricks of light on reflective surfaces. But the feeling was too potent, too real. The distinctness of the shapes, their coordinated movement, the sounds that had no source. I never requested another assignment at that station. I made it unequivocally clear. Any other job, anywhere else, but not there. Let it impact my overtime, my standing. I didn't care. Returning was unthinkable. What did I truly see? I possessed no explanation, only the visceral certainty of not being alone. Those reflections, lacking owners, move in with intent in the subterranean dark. I don't discuss it. There's nothing concrete to offer. Just the stark knowledge that something shared that space with me. Something unseen, yet undeniably present. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, the silhouettes reappear, black voids against white tile, converging silently. The memory constricts my chest. Occasionally, I wake abruptly, heart pounding, convinced they stand in the shadowed corners of my room, but they are never there. Their domain was the station, confined to those grimy, gleaming surfaces. That's the unvarnished truth. I was just a worker, doing a job, but I encountered something in that forsaken place. No violence, no voices, no overt attack. Just the suffocating weight of being watched, hunted, cornered by reflections that should not have been. That terror, profound and inexplicable, is why I will never go back. Let someone else brave the echoes and the eyes in the tiles. I am finished with that station.